Hey everybody, this is Mike. Welcome back to the Z Motorsports shop and channel. No, your eyes are not deceiving you. This is actually a Ford in my shop. So anyway, we've got a 2007, I believe it is, Mustang Shelby GT500. The gentleman has a rear end noise in it. He a little bit of a history on it. He had a fairly recent owner to the car. He had developed a pinion seal leak, took it to another shop. They changed the pinion seal, topped off the oil. Shortly after that, he picked up a bit of a whine on light acceleration or acceleration between about 45 and 65. And when he dropped it off, he said it's progressively getting worse. So I'm thinking it might have started it for oil, being with the pinion seal leaking. That pinion bearing's the furthest one away. So I know outer axle seals as well can be common, but just the way he described it with the acceleration and whatnot, I'm kind of suspecting to find a pinion bearing that's about ready to check out. So we're gonna get it torn apart, and thought maybe I'd throw the camera up and bring you along and see if I'm right, and check out rear end of a Shelby GT. So we got the brakes removed from both sides. Calipers held up out of the way there. I didn't film that because it's it's nothing. Everything's pretty straightforward. Just removing brakes. Nothing glamorous about that. I do have the oil drained. I hope this shows up. The gentleman says the guy he had it to had changed the oil in it when he changed the pinion seal. But I hope all that sparkly shows up. I think he said this only has about 150 miles on it, and I mean it's not terrible. I mean there's not chunks floating around in it, but you can see the swirling there of the glitter. So that's only 150 miles of oil, or excuse me, 150 miles on this oil. Coming up underneath the car, I have the sway bar and the panhard bar drop down out of the way so I can get my case spreader in here. But before I get to that point, whenever I'm doing one that I'm not necessarily changing gears or doing full setup on, I like to do a couple of things. I like to check the backlash, I like to check a wear pattern, and I like to check the rotating torque at the pinion. Now I'll check that a couple ways. I'll generally remove the brakes and check it, and then I'll pull the axle shafts, and then I'll check it, which is basically just going to give me the pinion and the carrier. So your combined preload. And then once the carrier is out, I'll check the pinion to see what the pinion preload is. I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say there's no preload because I just checked the pinion preload with the axle shafts, and I was getting maybe 6 or 7 inch-pounds. That's turning the whole assembly. Now granted, there's no friction from the brakes, but that's turning this whole assembly, and there's only 6 or 7 inch-pounds. I would say that's probably gonna end up being outer axle bearings and carrier preload. I would dare say there's not going to be any preload on this pinion. So when we get to that point, I will check that. But as far as backlash goes, I don't know if this will show up. Let me see if I move the camera. Thirteen, which is to the fat side. I think spec on this is 8 to 12. So for a car with less than 60,000 miles on it, that seems a bit excessive. So pattern-wise, I'm really not that impressed. On the coast side, it doesn't look too terrible, even all the way around. But if you go to the drive side, I'm not really digging that, which could be, I mean, it's really down in the toe, and it feathers off, and then it catches again up on the heel. Face to flank, it kind of looks centered, but I'm not liking that. So I don't know if that's part of the excessive backlash. Pinion depth, I think looks pretty decent. Like I said, because that's where you're gonna get your face to flank. But your toe to heel, I don't know. That just seems an odd pattern. And I've gotten this before on Fords for some reason. They paint up and they got kind of an odd pattern at times, but the coast side looks really good. So at that point, I'm gonna go ahead and pull the axle shafts. This has got a C-clip style. So, and fighting around this sway bar. you end up pulling this pin, or excuse me, this bolt right here, and then you pull this cross pin, push the axles in, pull the C-clip, and slide the axles out. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that now and get the axle shafts out of here. So a slight detour. I didn't film this. I didn't even think about having the camera on, but I was getting ready to pull the cross pin retaining bolt, to pull the cross pin out so that I can push the axle shafts in and extract them. This is a C-clip style axle. And this is the second of these 8.8 Fords that I've done here in the last couple of years. Both of them have had this cross pin bolt broken. The first one I did a couple years ago, it broke almost out towards the end, and I was able to get a little bit of a spot of weld on it and weld a nut onto it and get it extracted. This one I thought, well, I'll put the wrench on it, give it a little bit, see if it breaks loose. If it does, great. If not, I'll get some heat in there and heat up that thread locker. I put a wrench on there and it started moving. Not real easy, but not real hard either, like it was bound up. I didn't feel any snap. I just worked it out. I got it most of the way out, and that right there is the piece that come out. Hope that shows up on camera. Looking at the end, it almost doesn't really look, it looked like maybe just a little tiny bit was all that was holding it together. This a little bit right there. The rest of it's all pretty, I don't know, oil soaked or old fatigue crack, I don't know, but there's just a little bit right there. And so I reached in, I center punched it using a transfer punch, and I reached in there with my little 45-degree pneumatic drill and was able to get it started drilling it. As I was drilling it, all of a sudden the drill bit popped in. And I thought, oh, wait a minute, that must have threaded in. So then I thought, well, I haven't had the greatest luck with left-handed drill bits, but I thought I'll give it a try. I grabbed my small cordless drill motor, put my left-handed, 1/8-inch left-handed drill bit on it, and went into that same hole. Now, I couldn't get a very straight shot on it, so I ended up pulling the right side cap off. That gave me a little bit better angle in here, and I was able to start drilling. As soon as I saw shavings started coming out, I put just a little bit more pressure on the drill motor, and this thing backed right out. It came out right to where it was even. I grabbed it with my little magnet and pulled it right out. So this is the second one of these, and so basically out of the last couple of years, 100% of these Ford 8.8s have had broken cross pin retaining bolts in them. So the cross pin's ready to come out. I'm going to pull the axle shafts out, get my case spreader. There's my case spreader right here on the floor. I'm going to get my case spreader set up and get ready to start pulling this carrier. So this is why I'm so adamant about using a case spreader. Without a case spreader, there's no way to get this properly, the preload properly set. And you're going to end up prying and prying. You can get them out sometimes, and you can get them back in. However, you can't get them back in with the exact proper shim stack. So spread that case about 20/1000 of an inch, and it will allow you to extract the carrier easily, and more importantly, put it back together properly. Okay, so now I'll go ahead and grab the OEM shims out of here, keep them track right to left, and then I'll go measure those, and then I'll pull the pinion. So I have the carrier and all the bearings out. It's not fully disassembled yet. One thing that jumps right out at me is how much sludge is on all the components. It's not like just normal gear oil. This has been caked on there. So this is kind of indicative of maybe there's been some heat in this. Maybe when the seal blew out on the guy, it got lower on oil than he thought it did. But yeah, there's a lot more sludge on here than I anticipated. So especially where it had fresh gear oil in it after the seal replacement. So I think it might have been run quite low on gear oil, and then it heated up and got this layer baked on it. Then when the seal was replaced, the cover was removed, fresh gear oil was installed. It just didn't, it's only been in there a few hundred miles, and it wasn't enough to kind of, the detergents and stuff in it weren't enough to clean everything off. But by that time, I think the damage was already done to these bearings. The bearings are not terrible, but they do have what I would say an accelerated wear pattern. I mean, you can't really feel it in there, but this is more closely resembles a bearing that's got 150,000+ miles on it, not 57,000. There's some pretty good marks in this, wear marks in both the inner and outer pinions, as well as the carriers to some. The carriers got kind of an odd one. It's like that right down the middle. It's not on either end, it's right down the middle. The rollers themselves don't look terrible. Same with the pinion. The pinion bearings don't look terrible. As a matter of fact, they actually look pretty decent, other than the caked on sludge and gear oil. So anyway, the clutches for the limited slip, they've even got, I mean, look at that, they've even got sludge inside of them. So I generally don't pull clutches apart on these if I'm just doing bearings, but seeing as how much metal, how much glitter the oil had in it, that oil's carrying those metallic shavings throughout everything, all the bearings, obviously the clutches, everything. So I decided to go ahead and pull the spring retainer out, pull the clutches apart. I'm going to clean them. Everything's going to get thoroughly cleaned in the solvent tank. I like to soak the clutches in some friction modifier before they go back in. But then as soon as the bearings show up, we can start pressing new bearings on and get it all back together. But anyway, like I said, this is just kind of odd with the amount of wear that these bearings are displaying. Well, everything's apart. I've got the axle bearings out. The left side axle bearing actually come out in pieces. Not quite sure why that come apart in pieces. Everything else, there is quite a significant amount of wear in the pinion bearings, but also I'm seeing a weird pattern on the carrier bearings. The clutches are all disassembled. A lot of sludge built up inside of them, so they're going to get a thorough cleaning, and then I'll soak them in some friction modifier before they go back into the carrier. So right now everything's pretty much disassembled. The carrier bearings all pressed off, and these are ready to go into the solvent tank for a good thorough cleaning. So the rear end's going back together. I have all of the parts cleaned in the solvent tank, blown off. I like to go through and inspect everything right down to the cross pins for any wear or anything abnormal. So all of this is inspected, checked out, cleaned thoroughly. Each clutch for the clutch pack was pulled apart and cleaned. Seeing as how it did spend some time in the solvent tank getting rid of all that metallic sludge that was on them, I do like to re-soak them in a mixture of gear oil. But now the gear oil already has the limited slip additive in it, but I like to soak it in a little bit more. So it'll soak here probably overnight, at least in like an hour, but I'm just about ready to close up the shop here, so I threw them in there. I do have new carrier bearings pressed on each side of the carrier. I have the new pinion bearing pressed on with the proper shim. And I'm getting ready to install the axle shaft bearings and seals and the pinion races, excuse me. And then this was pretty much where I'm going to leave off, and then I can start assembling it. I've got the bearing heater over here all set up and ready to go. So as soon as I get to that point, I can throw the outer pinion bearing on it and get it heating while I'm mocking everything back up and assembling everything. So this is pretty much cleaned, ready. The housing itself has been thoroughly cleaned and dried. There again, there was a ton of that metallic sludge throughout the axle tubes, in the inside casting of the housing and everything. So that's all been cleaned and prepped. All the bearing caps and everything over here are cleaned. The spring for the clutch packs, differential cover, everything's cleaned and ready to be reassembled. I have everything cleaned. I've got the clutches soaking. Those will go into the carrier here in a few minutes. I have the pinion bearing pressed on. The races are in the rear end. I have it soaked with gear oil. The bearing over here, this is where I differ again from a lot of shops. I actually heat the outer bearing race up. I do not like beating them on. I will heat it up to approximately 250 degrees. I've got a marking crayon here. When the inside race, that melts. That's at 250 degrees, which opens it up just a couple of thousandths, enough to press on with that interference fit. So at that point, I have to work quick. I stab the pinion in with the crush sleeve. I put the outer bearing on, the slinger, the yoke, and the nut. And then I get it tightened up to 0 lash, and then I start compressing that till I get my roughly 18 to 25 inch-pounds of rotating torque. Okay, pinions in, outer bearings on. I cooled it down with some oil before I put the seal and everything in. Then I put the yoke on. I put a little bit of RTV on the back side of the nut to keep oil from creeping up the splines, and then put the nut on and tighten the crush sleeve down. I hope this shows up. I'm sitting at about 21 maybe inches of rotating torque. You don't want to watch the breakaway. You want to watch where the needle settles down to. It's about 21 inches, inch-pounds of rotating torque. I think 18 to 25 is the spec on this, so we're right there. Now I'll put the carrier and everything in, and we'll double check it again. That way I know what the carrier preload is, because it's the accumulation or the cumulative number of the pinion preload plus whatever it is. So I usually shoot for 3 to 5. So let's just say it's 25. Then we'll know this is the carrier's 4 if we get to 25. So anyway, I'll come back and measure that as soon as I get the carrier in. So clutches are in. Spring pin is in. That keeps pressure on the clutches. I put the center cross pin in and just started the retaining bolt 1 thread just to hold the pin and hold everything in there. I don't think it'll go anywhere, but I just like putting that in there so as I'm lifting it in and out, I don't have to worry about things falling out. So now I'll take a little bit of gear oil and put on the bearings and get the case spreader on, and this is ready to go back in the housing. Carrier's installed, case spreader's removed, backlash is at 10 thousandths. If you remember, I had 21 inch-pounds of rotating torque on the pinion alone. I have 28, so I've got 7, which is to the high side, but that's right where this was set up from forward. So it's got 28 inch-pounds of total rotating torque. And then I always engrave gears that I do on the outside of the ring gear there. So I've lubed the outer axle bearings, slid the axle shafts in, put the C-clips in, put the cross pin in, and the cross pin retaining bolt. So everything's pretty much buttoned up here. I'm going to give this cover area a good wipe down, install the gasket and the cover, put the drive shaft back on, probably let it sit overnight, and fill it with gear oil, and then button up the track bar and the sway bar and put this thing down on the ground. All right, well, I think I left off showing the backlash and the pattern on the rear end, but it is back together. I just got back from the second successful road test with it, so everything's good. The owner's ready to come and pick it up. It's actually kind of a fun little car, so I hope he's happy with it. But I appreciate you coming along for this little journey. So if you like, give me a thumbs up and subscribe. And I'm sorry this wasn't as detailed as I originally set out to make it. I just wanted to cover some highlights, and this was a car I hadn't worked on before. So thank you very much for watching.